All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here with tonight's workshop. Really appreciate everybody jumping in here live for tonight's baseball parents workshop for the month of February. We're going to go over navigating the cost of recruiting. So, I just want to give you some thoughts on how to best make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck, how to spend your money wisely, answer any questions y'all have on just navigating the cost of this recruiting process. So I've got recruiting coach Hunter Golden on here with me as well. So we should have hopefully some good insight for y'all on this topic. So if you get a chance, give us a follow on the social media. Got the X and the Instagram handles up there for NCSA Baseball. Always a good way to keep up with some things that are happening. And I'm going to record tonight's workshop, so we'll send it out afterwards. So anything that we talk about, or if you got to jump out early for some reason, we'll send out that recording here, and then y'all can go back over it when you get a chance. So with all that said, go ahead and dive into it. Let's get rolling here. So our agenda for tonight, Coach Hunter and we'll just have our conversation around, the navigating the cost of recruiting topics, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A as well. So utilize that chat box, that Q&A. If you have any questions, you have any scenarios you want to throw at us or run by us that you guys are, thinking about or looking at or want to, check on with us, tonight's a great night to get those answered. So utilize that chat box, throw them in there for us. Okay. Got a few upcoming workshops here for the rest of February as well, and start to peek into March. So for anybody who needs some help with shooting your skills video, next week we got our monthly skills video workshop there. Preparing for spring for the hitters. Last month I did the pitchers. This month we're going to do the hitters, just kind of all the offensive position players. So just getting ready for spring season there. Baseball recruiting 101's coming up, emailing coaches. And then one of our baseball recruiting coaches is going to be starting a monthly series on mental performance specifically for baseball, which is pretty awesome. So he's going to have his first workshop in February on goal setting. So if you want to get some mental performance specific talk around baseball, we're going to have those coming in as well. So very excited to have those. Check that one out on the 24th for the first one there. Okay. All right, let's do a couple intros here, and then we'll get rolling. I'm not even sure if I introduced myself when I started talking. So this is Andy Drake. I'm the Senior Elite Program Coordinator for baseball. I oversee our elite members here on the baseball side of things, hosting tonight's workshop. Former college coach, head coach, recruiting coordinator, a couple D3 programs, former D3 player, high school teacher, coach, AD for about a decade, been here for over 12 years. So hopefully be a good participant here tonight. But Coach Hunter, quick intro for the folks listening.
Yeah, my name is Coach Hunter Golden. I've been with NCSA like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, somewhere around those lines. But been in the college game, player, coach, primarily summer college is my big background as a front office guy. For probably the better part of 25 years now plus. So excited to talk a little bit about budgeting for this stuff and making sure you don't blow a hole in your bank account.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to do these days, unfortunately. So let's get into this, man. So navigating the cost of recruiting for a lot of parents, for a lot of families, this is like a big part of the discussion about getting after this whole thing. So one thing, coach, is it's early. It's important to start early with this idea. Now, I say that with the understanding that, hey, we may have some folks that are upperclassmen, maybe just getting started, and they're kind of like, oh man, maybe we didn't do so much budgeting early on. So we're going to get into some of that as well. But for anybody who's got some time here, that's got opportunity to plan a little bit, what's so important about kind of planning early for budgeting the cost of recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, the long and the short of it is it's not cheap. And it
Yeah.
adds up quick. And I think starting to think about these things, what it is you need to do, where it is you're going to need to go, are all really serious considerations here, especially for folks that are young. Like, I think my best advice when it comes to like the early beginnings of putting a recruiting budget together is to really learn about the process. Especially a lot of the NCSA university classes on here are super, super helpful. I think, there is I think this constant like battle that parents specifically have to fight between like the anxiety that the sports industry puts on them to like, if you're not at every single event, you're going to be totally missing out. And then being, realistic about where you're looking. And, those are things that are going to come into a clearer focus as your student athlete gets older and improves, right? But to kind of get out ahead of it in terms of the early stuff, it's like really learning about how the process works, right? Like a lot of basics about, where, what are some, the demographic numbers, right? Like one big statistic the NCAA put out there, right? 90% of student athletes end up committing to a school that's within 3.5 to 4 hours of their front doorstep, right? Maybe going to the recruiting event, time after time after time after time down in Jupiter might not be the best use of your time and money, right? Maybe your student athlete is already looking like they may be a high academic student, right? How those schools recruit is very, very different from how more, I don't know, call it like the, but, from how other schools recruit, right? So I think the biggest thing about putting a budget together early is learning how this stuff works and like really getting down to brass tacks about what your student athlete is, where they're sort of projecting out at, and learning as much as you can.
I think, and I love that. And I think a big thing that I took away from that is, there's a lot that can be done early that may not be that valuable down the road, right? So I think sometimes where families kind of run into trouble or kind of run into a little bit of like, man, what are we doing here? Like we do a lot of things early that are very expensive and drawn out that really probably aren't going to have a lot of return on that investment down the road. So thinking about that early too, 13U tournaments, 14U tournaments, there's no coaches there, right? I mean, let's just be real, Coach Hunter. There's no college coach coming to those tournaments. So, to spend $10,000 to go to a week in Cooperstown, hey man, no, if that's something that you did or are planning to do, that's great. But those kind of opportunities aren't necessarily going to lead to recruitment necessarily down the road. So, this is something where it's like if you miss that stuff, or if you feel like you look back in the past and you didn't do it, it's probably okay. If you can make it happen, great. But also don't stretch so early where we get to like 15 to 16 years old. Now we're like, man, we don't have anything left, when that's actually when we really probably need to have stuff to do things, right?
Yeah, I think people do, travel and club ball for a variety of different reasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of those creates some, like, family memories and some, have some great experiences with your kids, right? Like Cooperstown's one of those things. But just understand that, like, when your, child is 12, 13, 14, like, there isn't a college coach on the planet that's particularly bothered with what they're doing or what their performances are at those events. And just to be truth be told, and we'll get into this a little bit, they're caring less about the 15 and 6-year-old tournaments too.
Mm-hmm.
So because of the transfer portal and some other things. So, I think the biggest thing is just, kind of making sure you're asking yourself the right questions. And I think a lot of this stuff too is a lot more common sense than people realize. I think
Yep.
we kind of put recruiting up on a pedestal. We'll get into that a little bit later here, but it's just asking yourself the right questions and having like a
Mm-hmm.
process as to how you weed
Yeah.
through a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, just make sure that you're prioritizing like what you can do comfortably. I think, if it's a big stretch, it's probably not the end of your recruiting process if you can't do something. So I think that's also part of it as well. Figure out what makes sense, what you can budget for, what's not going to be too much of a stretch. If it comes down to this event or putting food on the table, skip the event. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit, far, but it's not that you can't get recruited if you're not keeping up with the Joneses. So that's also
Yeah.
part of it as well.
And I think another big thing is like you have to understand like, hey, what's going to be paying dividends in the long term, right?
Yeah.
Is it
Yep.
going to be this trip to Jupiter or the World Wood Bat or playing on some plastic field in California when you live on the East Coast? Like, or could you spend 20% of that, and, get your son or daughter, hitting lessons,
Mm-hmm.
strength and conditioning, things that are going to pay dividends, over time and that
Yeah.
are going to contribute to their ability to get recruited.
Yep. And so the earlier we think about this stuff, the better. All right. So camps and showcase events, always a big part of this conversation. We have lots of workshops and lots of conversations about this, but from this specific sort of, lane of the cost of recruiting, how is it important, or why is it important to really kind of think about how these fit into, being selective with these camp and showcase events?
Yeah, I think the first thing that parents can do is really understand how coaches use these events
Mm-hmm.
to recruit players, because how coaches use them and how these organizations market them there's a big gap there, to say the least, right? Um, more often than not, you're the best way to get seen by individual staffs, top choice schools, is going to be going to their camps, right? It's going to be getting in front of the entire coaching staff all at the same time. They can work with your kid. Your kid gets the chance to play with the coaches, see what the competition is, get on campus, get a feel for what it's like to play on that playing surface. Sometimes those camps will staff with players on the team. So you get to talk to some of your prospective teammates about what coach is like when he's not recruiting you, right? And I think that hands-on experience with the college staff is really important because I think a lot of, especially young kids, will put certain programs up on a pedestal, and then they get to know the coaching staff, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe this one, isn't for me. So it can be just as impactful in terms of, ginning up some interest for yourself as it can be, maybe weed out some places that you thought might be a good fit, but aren't. And you also get a chance to kind of see the competition in terms of what that particular program, is recruiting. They also cost a lot less than going to some of the bigger, higher end showcases that are out there, right? Most college coaches are going to want you to go to their camp. It's not a requirement. There are guys that do get recruited without ever going to a camp. But like if you've got schools that are at the top of your list, like that's going to be the best way to kind of get the feedback and evaluation that you're looking for. Now, kind of the caveat with those is you have to be ready to be seen by those coaches as well. Like going when you're a freshman in high school is not going to be a way that's going to particularly, get yourself noticed or get you a future, offer with a particular college coach. And, name recognition can work two ways too. Like, yeah, there's a lot of late bloomers out there, but some folks will go to certain camps early, right? Not make the best impression. And a coach might see that name later on down the road and time doesn't expire as quickly for them. And they're like, oh, yeah, I already saw that kid. I don't know if I need to see him again, kind of thing. All right. So you kind of have to play it by ear, like talk to your recruiting coaches, talk to your clubs and travel coaches when you're kind of weeding through those. Also being careful about, understanding that some of these camps, this is where kind of some of that common sense comes into play, right? If they're, it's all about being proactive and asking the right questions about these events, right? Having your student athlete, reach out to the school and be like, hey, how many guys, are you guys planning on recruiting in my position in my particular class year? That's going to give you an instant, lens into, hey, here's how many spots they're actually recruiting for in that class in your position, right? And then asking things like how many slots are available at the camp, right? If they're looking for 3 or 4 middle infielders in a given class and there's 40 slots available at the camp, you're going to get a really good evaluation. You're going to get real hands-on experience working with the coaching staff there. There's like 150 dudes there. Like, put yourself in the coach's shoes. Like, would you write 150 scouting reports up of players at a camp, right? And then there's some other, camps that bigger brand name schools. They understand that they have brand power. They also have huge coaching staffs and not every coach is paid as much as others on the staff. And, they use some of these camps as a way to, generate revenue, maybe find some guys, but like they're not kind of the recruiting event that you might think that they are, right? So, you just need to be selective about that. When it comes to the showcases, those are a little different too. Most of the time, coaches are going to showcases to watch guys that they're already aware of, that maybe they couldn't get them to their camp. They couldn't see them at a tournament or a high school game or a club game. Or maybe they did, and they want to watch them a couple more times to be sure that that's what they're there to see, right? So, for anybody that's gone to some of these, you probably watched some of the coaches behind the backstop who are, paying attention about 10% of the time. And 10% of the time they're really paying attention is to watch the guys that they're there to see. Now, if you're not getting, you're not on the coaches list, you dead. No, but just like camps, you have to be proactive in reaching out to these organizations, finding out what schools are being there, sharing out video in advance, right? And having a clear understanding of what those particular programs actually look for in players. So,
Yep.
It's a little bit different than just signing up for an event, showing up, whacking a ball around the field and hoping that, you're just going to get seen and loved and appreciated.
Yeah, yeah. I had an interview recently with Jason King, who's the head
Mm,
coach at the University of Dayton,
yeah.
and we talked about camps a little bit and how he works those, and he had some great insights. I wanted to share a little bit for those who didn't watch my interview, but if you didn't, go watch the interview with him. But he talked about the camps. He will invite every kid that reaches out to his camp, and he is very upfront about, like, anybody who reaches out, we will send them a camp invite. He said it goes two ways. It shows us how serious you are about potentially being recruited by us. I mean, also, hey man, like the reality is, he said if we have 75 kids at that camp, maybe we have interest in two or three of them. He said that's going to be the reality of these camps as well. But it shows us that there's some interest there, But you also have to do your research and understand what you're getting into. So if you're not their guy, or if the people around you are not giving you feedback to say, hey, your velo or your sort of metrics and so forth, they're probably not going to catch that school's attention. That's one way to really kind of figure out, well, maybe I don't invest in that event yet. Let's maybe become the kind of guy they're looking for first before we get there. So, as Coach Hunter said, there's definitely things to be thinking about. Coach, one question came in on this topic here. So, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's just real specific. There's so many of these campus showcase events. We can't get to everything, right? So, what's some additional thoughts or advice on, like, how do we kind of narrow in on which ones to potentially pick versus which ones to maybe kind of hold off on for now?
Yeah, I mean, I think right off the rip, like, number one, get an evaluation session with your recruiting coach here at NCSA, or if you can't do it with us, like your club or travel coach.
Hmm.
Like, get a grip on like where your student athlete is ability wise. Like, it's tough sometimes to have tough conversations with younger kids. There's this balance of like wanting to really encourage, you know, um, their ambition and what they ultimately want to do and their goals, but there's an extraordinarily harsh reality when it comes to college baseball, especially nowadays with the transfer portal and older players really taking, a front seat to high school players. So knowing kind of where you stand in the level of schools that you're going to be able to get the attention from, I think is really the first step, right? And then being able to align that with whatever your student athletes' particular goals are academically, like what they want to major in, what they're looking for in a school, sort of what your budget is. And these are, conversations that you can be having with them and building out really a target list of schools that you have a chance to play at, that you can get into, that check a lot of the boxes of what it is that you want in your college experience, right? I think everybody's a little bit different with how they skin the cat. With a lot of my guys, I'm very targeted. I don't think going to big box events is a very productive use of your time ever, right? It's having an understanding of where you're at, orienting to yourself towards that range of schools, and then that's sort of the camps that, now you're going fishing where the fish are biting, right? Understanding who's recruiting your position. You have to be proactive in the process. You can't just sign up, cross your fingers, hope you're going to get some attention, right? It takes some digging to find out where these schools are at, what they're looking for, the whole 9 yards. So I think that to me, that's the first step in figuring this stuff out, right? Some of these showcases are like so industrialized now. There was like 1,200 kids at I-95 a couple years, like last year. Like, as a coach, like, I don't even know if I would want to go to that. I'm just being honest. It's just wading through a mass of humanity. So like, you kind of have to understand where you're at. I think, again, camps are going to be the best way to get in front of those coaches. And then for the places you can't go, being proactive and talking to the coaching staffs about, hey, what's some advice that you guys have for us on the best way to get seen and evaluated by your staff heading forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody can go to every camp. You guys are not a bottomless pit. That's the whole topic of the conversation tonight. Your sons and daughters do not come with magic teleportation devices. You can't be everywhere all at the same time. So ask questions about like, hey, where might you guys be? What are some other opportunities to maybe get seen by you guys in the future? Where are some places that we can go? A lot of families sometimes are pretty surprised to find out that, they might be at a tournament or a particular event and that staff's already planning on being there, so it's just about being proactive with all of those things. So
Yep.
But my biggest word of advice is get evaluated. Like if you're throwing like, low 80s as a sophomore, junior, like, going to a Division I school right now is probably not going to be a productive use of your time,
Mhm.
so get evaluated, and that's the place to start.
All right, great stuff. So, speaking of now kind of looking on the other side of it, there are going to be ways that are either free or, low cost to maybe get some resources, within recruiting. So, social media, being able to share things there. You mentioned, coach, your connections, high school coaches, travel coaches that might be able to help plug you into things. We had a question come in around, hey, I play on this national travel team, which obviously there's a cost to that. But, how do we kind of utilize, the ways that we can utilize our circle, the social media, which is a huge impact nowadays in recruiting? How do we kind of utilize some of these free or, lower cost opportunities rather than some of the more expensive stuff?
Yeah, I think people, don't start close to home enough. And I'm not even
Mm-hmm.
talking about geographics. I'm just talking about the people in your wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your high school coaches, talk to your club coaches. More often than not, these are guys that have played college baseball. They have their own network. It's a big world. It's also a small world. And, I have the ability to open doors with certain guys that maybe you don't, Andy, and same thing, vice versa, where I can text a couple coaches that I know and be like, hey, man, what do you think? Right? And get some very honest feedback about where that player is. Sometimes the best events to go to are like, some guy owns a club, or a facility, and he's got like 8 of his coaching buddies in the area. He's like, hey man, just come on down, $100, come get evaluated by these guys, and they're going to be there. And like that's much better use of your time than going to, the Super Bro showcase 6,000, 2,000 miles away from home, So, and those are coaches that are going to be more likely to recruit you and more interested in getting a, they're going to be more direct with you in terms of, where you're at. Right. So I always tell guys, like, take advantage of all resources that you already have. A lot of guys get a little timid to ask those questions to coaches. So you're not going to know the answers you're looking for if you don't ask for them. So, that can be some great ways,
Yeah,
to help you out. Some of those are the best events.
absolutely. And the reality is, some of the folks that might be listening in live in maybe some more remote areas where even if they want to go to events, it's
Yeah.
like the closest city is 500 miles. I mean, if I live
Right.
in like, northeastern Montana, like, man, like, where do I even get to places for this kind of stuff? So, video is important. Get on Amazon and order a pocket radar gun, and get in your indoor mound and get some recordings on that. Get it on
Yeah.
video. Like, do the things you can do to showcase your skill set with video and the numbers. You can do a lot of that without going somewhere directly to get in front of people too.
I also tell guys, like, ask coaches when you email them too, like for
Mm-hmm.
feedback. Like one thing I always press my guys to do is like, you know, ask these guys, hey, am I the kind of guy that look like a guy could be a recruitable student athlete for your program? Not everybody's going to return your email. Coaches are busy. You may get some really valuable feedback, from those coaches. Some guys will take the time to respond to you. So I'm always telling guys, like, if you don't know, like, oh man, am I good enough to play at Franklin Pierce or something? Speaking of Jason King, email, be like, hey man, here's some video of me. I'm interested in the program. I don't want to burn a spot at your camp. I want to be sure of what I'm, getting myself into. Do you mind maybe giving me some brief feedback on whether or not you think I could compete at your level? A lot of times just going straight to the horse's mouth can be the most beneficial thing that you can do.
Yep, yep, for sure. So the travel cost, coach, you touched on a little bit about, kind of the starting local idea and, kind of, going further from home can maybe have some diminishing returns. So kind of talk about like why it's important to sort of optimize travel. Again, we're not necessarily minimizing, folks that maybe do have the means or have scheduled things that are further from home, but how is it like very beneficial to kind of look at the regional stuff, be able to like do the carpool stuff, all those kind of things. How can we kind of like save a little bit when we're thinking about
Yeah.
the travel stuff?
I mean, I implore most people, even guys that are like, you know, higher level players, college sports is so much more regional than travel sports implies. Um, and you see this in every sport, right? Like, The reason a lot of the baseball teams are good in the South is because they can play year round. The reason that the Big East doesn't get killed off is because high school basketball in Northern Jersey, New York City is a little different than it is everywhere else, right? Yes, some of the national powerhouse programs, like they have the resources to go out and recruit guys from all over the country. Most 1000% do not. Like, this is not basketball and football, like getting recruited out of region for colleges, recruiting guys out of region is expensive for them, and it's more expensive for you, right? So I always tell guys, like, stay closer to home. Most college coaches, the overwhelming majority of college coaches, recruit regionally, which means in their home state, couple states around them, and it's a lot more practical than people realize. The first is, speaking of money, the cost, right? In-state tuition invariably is almost always cheaper, and usually border states also have academic programs where they just have a deeper bag of financial tricks that they can dip into to make a student athlete's experience more affordable at their particular college. The economy isn't exactly booming, right? So your odds of getting that player are significantly higher. The other piece is, and this is way more practical, I can just see the player more and get better information on him. If he's an hour down the road from me, I can invite him to come to more of my camps and events. I can see him at more regional events. I can maybe sneak out and go watch him at a high school game. Harder to do that, but might have the opportunity to do that and just have a much clearer understanding of what it is that I'm bringing into my program because I can evaluate them more, right? I'm also getting better information on that player, right? Because we all have our networks and our professional lives. Like, apply this to yourselves, right? Like, I'm sure everybody has their network and they know the guys that are blowhards and kind of crazy, and they know the guys that are like real sort of silent assassins, great evaluators, whatever it is in any industry. So now I know I'm getting better information on that player. When you go out of region, all right, it's not impossible. There's a guy at Western New England up the road from me. He's from Honolulu. Why you would trade Hawaii for Springfield, I don't know. But it can happen, but the odds are significantly less. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, you have to go to them. All right. When you get outside of those brand name schools, like, recruiting resources dry up. Like, there are Division I schools that do not have scholarships for baseball players, right? Never mind the money they need to get to you to watch and recruit you, right? So they have to be very careful about how they're spending their resources, who they're spending their time on, right? And this isn't to put anybody down, but there's a very high possibility that there's a player in your backyard that is very comparable to your son or daughter, that they're just going to be able to see more. The school's going to be more affordable, so you got to kind of hope that they whiff on that kid. He doesn't go, and then that you'll accept a higher tuition bill, and they're going to take a leap of faith on your son or daughter with less information on them and not having watched them as much, right? So again, it happens, but it's a lot more difficult. So, like, when we're talking about travel costs, like, start regionally. Like I said, that study earlier, 90% of student athletes, like, they commit to a school within 3.5 to 4 hours of their front doorstep. Now, there's some regional challenges in there. Obviously, if you're in a more remote location, West Coasters, I think, definitely have a little harder. 80% of college baseball programs are east of Colorado, so there's more limited opportunity out there for your institution. So each region has some unique challenges that may force you to look a little bit outside of your region at some other options. But, like, I think one of the things, and you may disagree with me, Andy, on this, but, like, that just drives me nuts about club and travel sports in general is people traveling across the country to go play tournaments that could absolutely play in regionally and get way more value out of from a recruiting standpoint. It's crazy to me to spend thousands of dollars to fly hours and hours and hours away from home to play baseball against players that are not in your region in front of a ton of coaches that have absolutely no interest in recruiting your son or daughter. It's one of the things that kind of, like, makes me crazy. Now, there's certainly exceptions to that. You're a real elite player. You're like a national top 300, 400, 500 recruit. Yeah, man, probably going to play on some national teams. Jupiter's probably in the cards for you. Worldwood Bat's going to be a big thing. Arizona Fall Class, it's going to be a big thing. Like, you need to be where kind of your competition level's at. But for the overwhelming majority of folks, stay regional. You just save a boatload of money, and you're going to get way more bang for your buck in terms of getting recruited by colleges that are going to be interested in your kid.
Yeah, I don't disagree much at all. I think that, and again, there are going to be some folks in here who maybe do some of those things, and that's okay, right? There, it's not necessarily that, but the but the reality is, I think who we're talking to is a lot of the cases who we're working with are folks who are trying to figure out, should we do these things? If
Yep.
you do them, cool. If you can't afford it, it's okay. If you do the local stuff, you find the local Legion team, you play on the local, we might call it a travel team, but it's really just a club team that plays all their tournaments within their own state. Maybe, like I'm in Michigan, there's some teams that all they do is just play tournaments around Michigan. Their big trip is to go down to Grand Park in Indianapolis, right? That's their big trip of the year.
Yep.
But those guys all have tremendous opportunity to get recruited because Chicago's 2 hours away, Detroit's 2 hours away, Columbus is 3 or 4 hours away, Indiana, you can get to Kentucky, Tennessee. Those coaches come to Indianapolis, right? For that. So, those guys can still get seen just doing the local, regional sort of travel bit. So, again, if that's what you're doing good. If that's what your budget is made for, you're doing just fine if that's what's happening for you.
I think the biggest thing for families too, just to kind of reinforce the thing, especially if you want to have a conversation, with your kids, like start looking at the rosters of these colleges. Like look where they recruit guys from. Kind of bring it into a much clearer focus, much quicker, right, in terms of where they're going to be. So, again, it's just doing the work up front.
Yeah, for sure. Coach, this is probably a quick one, but just, I think the effort to get skills video is very important, right? I think sometimes we might, families may underestimate the video, maybe kind of think like, well, we got to just really invest in getting out and doing things and, do it. But getting a really good skills video is hugely important and can be a huge step in getting some interest from coaches. So, just a few thoughts on, just really taking the time to get that video and what exactly are coaches going to want to see in video if they are going to spend some time to really kind of get the strongest video they can for coaches.
Yeah, so I think straight on, like especially for guys maybe a little bit earlier, it depends a little bit on where you're at, right? For younger guys, skills video, skills video, skills video. So that professional style workout, like now I can see 10 or 12 swings. Now I can see you moving around the diamond, fielding the baseball, your arm strength, your foot speed, your body control, like kind of what you would see at a showcase, right? A PBR, PG, professional style workout kind of video is what coaches are going to want to see to kind of make that initial evaluation of guy. They're obviously going to want to see you at game speed, right? But that's the kind of video I would recommend that guys get first. And if it's going to be game footage, I mean, there's a couple different things. But I think the major thing is like, if you're going to be putting like highlights together, I don't want to see the blue single up the middle. Like, I want to see you roast a ball in the gap, right? Like, I want to see you work a long count, drive a ball in the gap kind of thing. Like, I want to see you beat a throw by a couple of feet kind of thing, right? I want to see something that's impressive, that shows your strength, your speed, your athleticism, something that's going to be a little bit more eye-catching. Now, some other things, to kind of keep in mind, like I know when I look at a lot of game footage of players, like I maybe I'm a little old school this way, but like I'm looking maybe less at the outcome sometimes and more about like things like plate approach, like how does this, pitcher throw when they're behind in the count, ahead in the count, what do they command well, what parts of the zone do they tend to live in, all of those kinds of things. So a lot of it's like a lot more sometimes approach more than outcome oriented for some guys, but those are the kinds of things in terms of putting an effective recruiting video together that I'm going to see. But I definitely want to see the skill stuff first. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we got to work, like I said, workshop next week on that, guys. I would also just say too, Coach, and maybe you agree with this, but maybe some other thoughts on like the game video. It's probably not that important until we get to like junior year and older, right? Like anything below that, or if it's like varsity level and you're playing as a freshman, okay. But like the age level needs to be like varsity and above, really. Anything that's not varsity level is not really going to be that useful game wise. So don't lose sleep over like trying to, lug your camera equipment around to all of those 14U games or freshman games, right?
Even at that, like even when you're trying to control for skill and with players in high school, like, maybe you zip the single up the middle, but like the shortstop's got the range of a garden gnome, or maybe you hit a double in the gap, but like, you move the fence to 10 feet back, like that's a routine out. The guy that hit the go-ahead home run in the World Series this year didn't have a hit for a month and a half. So like you may hit something that you have no business hitting, right? And usually the cherry on top, and I love all the parents in here, but you guys aren't exactly Steven Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino behind the camera, behind the backstop, so it can be hard for coaches to see it. So film a couple of things, obviously, but like for the most part, like enjoy watching your sons play
Yeah.
baseball.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's really kind of the positive spin. Hey, and just enjoy the games. A lot of it'll take care of itself in the recruiting. Get those good skills videos, and a lot of it kind of takes care of itself from there. All right, Coach. As far as like scholarships and financial aid, we got to maximize that too, right? Now, again, we've got other workshops to get a lot more into the details of this, but just as far as like the cost of recruiting and really helping like a good outcome here, just a few kind of general thoughts on why it's important to make sure that we're doing our research on the academic stuff, the FAFSA, need-based stuff, just maximizing financial aid, and why it's important early on in the process to make sure we're doing these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the big thing is, make sure you stay on your kids about keeping their grades up. The better the grades, the more opportunities they're going to have. For the obvious reason, the more places they're going to be able to get into. But the not so obvious reason that I think people don't, fully grasp is that an upwards, I'd say 70-80% of the money in college baseball is on the academic side. It's not college football. They're not handing out full scholarships like candy. So I think the strongest likelihood of the money that your student athlete's going to get is going to be on the academic side, right? So start researching at some of these schools, what kind of academic scholarships might be available. Get your FAFSA form done. Gosh, I mean, I would even say as early as you possibly can get it done before senior year. But, I think one of the big things with that is researching, these the specific colleges and universities, specifically when you get to like division three schools. They're a little bit more like the Wild West when it comes to academic opportunities. And one thing that's kind of funny, cool, and a little bit of a relief about division three institutions and some division twos is these places all have, I call it academic funny money, where they have kind of these like sort of crazy scholarship programs that are very institutionally specific, so they don't offer them at other places. That some alum that just so happened to love baseball like decided randomly, hey, I'm going to put together $100,000 a year scholarship fund, and as long as the guy's on the baseball team and his GPA is at this, like you may have access to some of that money. So I'm always telling, folks, especially when you start talking to coaches, like ask them what kind of opportunities are out there, some things that might be under the hood, so to speak, at some of these institutions, because people are pretty surprised, what they might be able to pull together for themselves. So there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, do your research. Just really make sure you're handling that part of it too, because in the long run, that will be a huge part of cost savings. And then I think this is my last slide. Yep, it is. All right. So last slide here, Coach. One part about kind of just navigating the cost of recruiting is also, you started to touch on it, is just making sure that we are identifying schools that will be affordable, that actually will make sense for us as a family, for the student athlete to be, hey, I'm not going to school, and then worrying the entire time about how I'm going to pay for my tuition the entire time I'm there. So just make sure that keeping options open. Junior college, maybe if that's something you haven't looked at, that's going to be a very affordable route for a lot of folks if, cost is a concern. Making sure other four-year schools are in the mix that may be more affordable. So you started to touch on a little bit there, but just in general, just looking at the tuition and, the overall kind of out-of-pocket cost and that worry about college down the road, just why is it important to make sure we're keeping our options open from that perspective?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you never know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, there's that piece. But I think today more than ever, I mean, just talking about it from a practical baseball standpoint, like I think there's two things that are true now that might not have been the case 3 to 4 years ago. And number one, I think it's more challenging for high school athletes to find the spot in college athletics nowadays. Like, the number was right around like 7-8% of high school baseball players play at any level of college baseball. I'd say that number is probably close to 5 now, maybe even lower than that, to be honest with you. So, kind of trying to find schools at your level is really important. I'd also say that this is the second piece of that. I think it's harder for folks to figure out where they stand than ever before. And I think the great quirks about college baseball and one of the worst things about college baseball is there's like dozens, hundreds of places you can go to accomplish your goals, whatever they might be, on a baseball field, both short term and in the long term, right? Tough part about that is there's hundreds of places you can go, and figuring out where to start is a real pain in the backside, especially if you don't know anything about anything. So, I think keeping your options open, getting to know really the local baseball scene, just to kind of come back to the regional piece. Like, I was talking to a player earlier tonight from Pennsylvania, and like that's a really awesome baseball state in terms of the college opportunities that are out there, right? They've got obviously Penn State, Pitt, those are like Power Four conference schools. They've got some pretty decent mid-major Division One schools there. The PSAC at the Division Two level is one of the most competitive Division Two baseball conferences in the country. Major leaguers have come out of that league, right? Misericordia won the national title at D3 2 years ago. So like tons of great opportunities, right in that player's backyard to start learning about. So I tell folks like cast a wide net. I think the one great thing about baseball is like if you prioritize a place where you're ultimately going to find a really great fit as opposed to like what's the cool name on the front of the jersey, you can have a really, really fantastic fit. So, and there's so many ways, like, well, I say it's a little harder to get to where you want to go to out of high school with the portal, right? Portal giveth, the portal taketh away, right? There's more ways to get to where you want to go to than there ever were before, right? So maybe that first stop, isn't the final stop. So
Yep.
I tell folks like get a handle on what's out there, what's available, what things cost, like as early as you possibly can, and get your student athlete, sort of into that mode of not so much being brand conscious, but being conscientious about what their needs are as a student, as a person, as an athlete.
Yep. And what's going to make sense for cost stuff, obviously down the road too, as far as like setting you up beyond college, is it going to make sense to go somewhere where we got to
Yeah.
take out more student loans, or if this school has a better academic package, but maybe it wasn't the school I was thinking of initially, but that's going to be a better path, maybe, for my next steps down the road too. So there's all those factors to be considering for sure. So, all right, I just threw a link to a survey in the chat box before anybody starts jumping out of here. I know some questions have popped in, and we're going to get to those. Fill out that survey link if you could, though. Pull that up while you guys are in here. Love to get some feedback there. Hopefully tonight's conversation has been helpful, and will continue to be as we get going here. So I definitely want to get to some of the questions here, Coach. Keep it on the roster openings, guys. Matches, evaluations. We can reach out to coaches on your behalf. Contact information's up on the screen there. So make sure you guys have that as well. And again, that link is in the chat box for that survey if you could fill that out. But Coach, a couple questions have come in here I want to get to. First of all, you've mentioned the transfer portal a couple of times here. So you kind of started to touch on it, but the question was like, how does that work? Where would you realistically start? I think you kind of just started to say that a little bit. The reality is, in order for you to really take advantage of that, you got to go somewhere and have a great start with where you go, right? Find a good fit, no matter what the level, no matter what. So, but talk more about kind of like how people are maybe even sort of, and we don't ever really want to think like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but how are people sort of like, strategically figuring out, hey, this is a good stop. Maybe it's not the last stop, but how do I find the best first stop?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea with the transfer portal, folks, is back in the day, if you wanted to switch a school, right, there used to be a rule in place that you could transfer to a new school, go to classes, you can practice with the team, but you had to sit out a year, all right? And they had that rule just to sort of, protect against, transfers making hasty decisions, right? Or maybe an uninformed decision. Now, you didn't lose that year of eligibility. It was almost like a deferred payment on a loan. They just tack it on to the end, right? But you had to sit that year out and take a timeout, right? Now, after COVID, they got rid of that rule. So now you can transfer to a school and you're eligible to play next year. All right. So what we've sort of seen is college coaches really gravitate towards older, more established players. Back in the day, I can't even think of how many great baseball players just like sort of faded into oblivion because they never had the opportunity to make that step up. Now, if you go and kill it at a JUCO, you kill it at a Division III school, like you move up to a Division I level. UConn's super regional team from 2 years ago had 7 guys that were 23-year-old Division III transfers that played at great, Division III programs and killed it in high-level summer leagues. And they got that opportunity, and they were 2 wins away from Omaha. And, a lot of guys, they're not really ready for a high level out of high school, right? And it's when they go to college that sort of that switch flips, right? Like Paul Skeens is the best player on the pitcher on the planet right now. He was a catcher 5 years ago, and kind of a washed out catcher at Air Force. So, like, a lot of crazy things happen when guys go there. So if you perform really well, you can create some additional opportunities for yourself sort of out of the transfer portal to maybe move up to something that, hey, you're not ready at 17, but at 22, 23, you're absolutely ready for, right? So we've seen coaches when, your job's on the line with wins and losses and you get paid a lot of money. Like, would you rather put that faith in a 17, 18-year-old, physically underdeveloped, never been away from home player, or some guy that's been smashing around college baseball for 22, for 3, 4, 5 years, that is physically a finished product and, knows what they need to do? Like, it's a no-brainer. And even if they're wrong, you're into that player for a year, say la vie, on to the next kind of thing. So it's kind of like, low risk on top of it. So,
Yeah. Yep.
that's created some challenges, I think, for high school players now. But like I said, well, that's, kind of limited guys out of high school. The guys are breaking through and going, like, you can go to a smaller end school, and create some amazing opportunities for yourself as long as you go there and produce. Now, I don't want to get too ahead of it. I'll keep this brief, but one thing that's not people don't know about the portal is 45 to 48% of the players that go into the transfer portal usually don't make their way back out, because kid goes to Westfield State and he's like, I hit 300. Look at me, aren't I great? And then there's 2,400 other players that hit 300 at the college level that are also in there. And some guys can lose and miss opportunities. So you got to make a real judgment call before you go ahead and do that. That's the long and the short about the transfer portal.
Yeah, and so that again, it's a reality, and it's a factor in the recruiting process nowadays for sure. So one question came in, Coach, and this was a little bit ago. I hope this person's still here, but was a really good question about we're on a national showcase team, right? We're on one of those travel teams where we do go kind of all over the place, and we go. Is there probably less need potentially to like do some of the camp or showcase events because we're a little more out in front, or are we still probably going to have to fit in, some of these events too, sort of from that individual perspective, or is being on that national showcase team, does that give us a little bit more of a leg up in being able to be seen by certain coaches?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different, right? I think every program's kind of attacked
Yeah.
the transfer portal and freshmen a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I know some Power Four schools that have been like very much in on elite freshmen, but they want guys that, like, they're going to take guys at the higher level, mid-major and higher levels of Division I. They want guys that are going to come in and disrupt their roster. Okay, that could come in and maybe start as a freshman, be the fourth outfielder, be the third middle infielder, be the backup catcher, be a midweek starter setup guy, right? They want like an impact guy. They don't want the developmental guy anymore. There's some other P4s and some stronger schools that, I'm really close with Power Four staff in the Big 12, and they don't go to any high school events anymore. They are completely out. They are 100% portal. They've ditched high school summer tournaments for my league and leagues like mine, summer college leagues, where they're seeing that D2 All-American, that D3 kid. There was a kid at MIT last year throwing 99. Those guys that are kind of coming up and figuring it out, like, those are the guys that they're looking to fill their roster out more year to year. So I think it's a balance, of being there, but like not completely overdoing it. Don't be shocked when you don't see the number of coaches that maybe you would expect to see there. I think just you need to be there at that particular level. If you're like at a national showcase level, you're a top 300, 400, 500 player, like you need to play against that competition to separate yourself. But you also, I think, need to be more proactive than ever in terms of asking questions, getting straight answers from coaches. Because the other big thing that's happening a lot at those top levels now is high school guys are just losing their spot. I had 2 guys that were going to Vanderbilt 2 years ago, and lost their spot a week before they were supposed to go to school because Vanderbilt found two guys in the portal they just like better. Right? Now, they had a pretty
Yeah.
soft landing, the two of them. They went like Northwestern, the other one went to BC, so they're gonna be fine. But like, it's when you get to that level of baseball, it's professional baseball. Like, don't mince
Yeah.
words, and it's sometimes it can be pretty brutal. So you gotta do a little bit of both.
Yeah, for sure. So one question came in about like, hey, we've sent out some messages, not getting much response or messages opened up. I would recommend jumping into one of our recruiting classes about emailing coaches. We've got one for baseball coming up next week, but we have other workshops as well. We can maybe help you kind of fine tune your messaging, maybe get into an evaluation session with a recruiting coach on the baseball team to talk more about who are you targeting, who are you reaching out to, maybe kind of changing strategy around that a little bit. So there could be some other things to be thinking about there as far as that goes. So let's see. Question came in about the video, transferring video to Vimeo or YouTube. So I mean, I think you just upload footage, like you just do that for free to YouTube, right, or Vimeo. Like I have a YouTube channel. If you got your own footage, just upload it there. I would recommend maybe reach out to our video team or reach out. We can maybe give you some advice there, Coach. We have a junior who's thinking about like what we're looking at like applying to schools. Like when do we start applying to colleges? When do we like need to like what happens first? Do we need to be talking to the coaches first before we apply or vice versa? Just got to give some thoughts there on kind of the rhythm of that.
Yeah, short answer is no. You don't have to wait for the coaches to
Yep.
apply to a school. You can apply to a school whenever you want to. Sometimes applying to a school can help you out if they know that you're already in and admitted, especially when you're talking about some of the more demanding academic schools that might be out there. Like that is not like just filling out an application, doing some finger paints, and sending your check in. Like it can be pretty involved, right? So them knowing that you're in and all settled can sometimes help you out in certain situations, particularly if like you're looking to maybe be a walk-on, something like that. That could really, really help you. So I tell folks there's really no limitation on applying to the school. But if you're not really serious about going to that school without playing baseball there, I would wait until you're having a conversation
Yeah.
with the coach.
The way I always kind of like to describe it is like the application process and the recruitment process, they're two parallel processes working alongside each other, right? So you have to do them both. It doesn't matter which one, like you could start talking to the coach first. That goes a long way. Hey, man, we want you to apply. Send us your transcripts. It might start that way. Or as Coach Hunter just said, it might start with, hey, this school I'm really interested in. I apply to it. And then eventually I connect with the coaches and get that conversation started. So it's not an either or. It's just two processes that have to both happen in order to eventually attend that college. Also, though, as far as the timing of applying to schools, that usually is not till the fall of senior year specifically. So applications for the next school year will usually typically open up August, September at the earliest, and then you work on those applications in the fall of senior year. Okay. All right. So another question came in. So someone was just agreeing with you, Coach. Like, hey, they've been on visits, went to WVU, went to Rutgers. Both coaches mentioned, like, yeah, man, if we can get a JUCO guy, we're going to take that guy over the high school kid. If everything else is equal. So yeah, people are starting to hear that a little bit. I've interviewed multiple coaches here recently. And I've had same. Now, one thing that the coaches have to find the balance of, as you have mentioned, Coach Hunter, is that one thing that they might sacrifice, and Coach King mentioned this, we may sacrifice a little bit of like the higher end potential of like that, because usually like the dudes, like the first round pick guys that we get are probably going to be those kids coming out of high school, right? Like the transfer guys that we get may not be that guy. It's just a more established sort of a guy that we know what we're getting sort of guy, where, they still want to get those high end potential, like high draft pick kind of guys. That's usually the high school recruits, but those guys are so few and far between. It's hard to get them sometimes.
Totally just went through that with my summer college team.
Yep,
I just ended up signing a lefty. We needed a left-handed. We've got some left-handed bats, but I've got one that really risky. I think he could go either way. Could be top 10 player in the league. Could be oof. And some other guys that kind of fill that. So we just needed a left-handed bat. Where we're like, man, I just need a college baseball player that's like not going to go out and potentially detonate themselves on the base pad. So went and signed a left-handed hitter from Bucknell that's been there for 3 years. He's played 3 years of summer ball. He's like a fringy all-star guy. I don't think he's going to be like an impact guy, but it's always one of those things where coaches are always trying to balance their ceiling with protecting their floor. And with the older guys, the older they get, the clearer understanding you have of what it is that you're out there
Hmm.
actually getting. Some of the most talented guys sometimes can be the most risky guys on your
Yeah.
roster, particularly when they're younger. So,
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's funny to hear that.
Yeah, awesome. And so as far as the FAFSA, so typically, I believe the date, it used to be October, but it's been pushed back to December now.
Yep.
So you actually can apply for FAFSA December 1st, depending on how the federal government is all situated at that point, as far as like starting to, put things together. But December 1st is the new date now. So generally, so for any current seniors, you should be able to get that going. If you're a 27 grad, you're not going to be able to actually submit it yet. You can start to prepare, get everything you need so that you're ready once next December, this upcoming December comes around, that you can start to submit that once the time comes. So that's a middle of senior year thing. So that's also something to keep in mind too. So cool. All right, Coach. I think we got all the questions in. If there's no other questions, guys, I'm going to throw that link to that survey in the chat box one more time. If you guys could click on that, fill that out. If there are any follow-up questions y'all have as far as like navigating the cost of recruiting, situations you want to run by us, reach out to us. I'll send out a recording of this here in a bit. Feel free to email me back. Schedule a one-on-one coaching session with one of our baseball recruiting coaches. We can definitely talk you through some of these things as well. So, Coach Hunter, thanks for the time tonight, man. Always appreciate the insight.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Everybody have a great night. Hopefully we'll see you at some workshops again soon. Y'all take care.